At 10:10 a.m. on January 7th, 2026, the Black Sea, Russia's presumed safe zone, a sanctuary Moscow believed no one could truly breach. The Kremlin saw this oil shipment as more than cargo. Fuel for the war machine, lifeblood for the logistics chain, power for its most modern weapon systems. But with the tanker just 30 miles from Novorossiysk, the script collapsed in exactly 73 seconds. Ukraine drove a strike straight into the engine room, turning the supertanker into an ocean of fire in the middle of open water. The answer lies in an 18-foot shadow, a cutting-edge USV skimming just 2 miles off the coast, slicing the water like a glass knife. Its name is Magura V5, and its real weapon isn't speed, it's physics. With a draft of only 1.3 feet, it rides so close to the surface that its radar signature is smaller than a seagull gliding over the waves. On the display of Russia's navigation radar locked onto the horizon, Magura doesn't appear as a target, but as a fleeting speck of interference. And then, it's gone. Because beneath the roughly 50-foot radar horizon, it becomes a ghost. Something that, in operational terms, almost doesn't exist. At first glance, anyone would assume the Magura V5 is just a floating bomb, carrying 705 pounds of explosives, a simple block of destruction, ramming straight into the target and ending the mission. But the truly frightening part is what's inside its belly. In there, it isn't empty space, but a neatly packed trap. 5 10-inch FPV drones, each fitted with a 5.5-pound thermobaric warhead highly effective for striking open compartments, the bridge, or ventilation openings, causing widespread damage deep inside an enemy ship. And Magura isn't going alone. In the sky, 6 UJ-26 Boyko UAVs are also moving into the area, like a second wave ready to close the ring. An attack package that, if you saw it on a map, would make any Russian military analyst freeze, because it doesn't follow the familiar logic of conventional defense. But before it can reach the tanker, Magura has to pass through a steel gate in the middle of the sea. The Boyko Towers gas platform seized by Russia and converted into offshore military outposts. That's no longer a gas rig. It's a steel fortress spanning up to 50,000 square feet, equipped with missile weapons, man-portable air defenses, heavy machine guns, and roughly 40 Russian troops on constant alert. And it doesn't stop there. The Boyko Towers also have a helicopter landing pad ready to respond, along with an observation post and sniper positions, turning it into a strategic choke point that dominates the surrounding waters. And right at that place everyone assumes is impossible to slip through, Magura V5 begins its infiltration. At the top of the fortress sat Neva-B, Russia's all-seeing eye, a radar system operating non-stop, 24 hours a day, capable of tracking low-altitude targets across sea and sky within a 34-mile radius. To the tanker's crew, its presence was a silent guarantee of absolute safety. Under that unblinking gaze, they believed this massive volume of oil would reach port without incident. But 300 miles away, in Odessa, a Ukrainian operator saw the same target very differently. On his screen, the enormous tanker was no longer steel, fuel, or sailors. It was nothing more than a cluster of coordinates drifting slowly across the Black Sea, a billion-dollar problem waiting to be solved. His solution didn't require defeating the fortress. It only required blinding it just long enough for Magura V5 to slip through like a ghost. And in this strike, Ukraine had 2 silent allies. The first was the sea itself. Waves rising to about 4 feet formed a constantly shifting veil, a living curtain that allowed a slow-moving ghost boat to dissolve into the surface, nearly impossible to detect with the naked eye. The second ally came from the sky, 6 UJ-26 Boyko UAVs. With a range of up to 600 miles and speeds reaching 144 miles per hour, they were not just fast, they were deceptive. These drones continuously changed altitude, ranging from 98 feet to 9,843 feet, creating a storm of false signals. Russian radar began seeing too much at once. Real and fake merged. The true target vanished into the noise. And when the all-seeing eye could no longer tell reality from illusion, that was the moment the ghost passed through. Everything was in position. The trap had been laid. and the Russians were about to pay a very expensive price for the most dangerous thing in defense: underestimating the enemy and complacency. Then the SATCOM signal lit up an invisible nod from a control point 300 miles away. With roughly 6 miles to the target, its payload bay slid open with the dry, cold hiss of hydraulics. Inside, 5 compact FPVs sat like blades, stacked in the exact order they were meant to be used. This wasn't a simultaneous launch. This was a pre-written tactical score, and Ukraine was pressing play, letting each beat land exactly where it needed to. FPV number 1 left the bay first. It didn't dive at the target. It didn't strike anything. Instead, it climbed on a steady, clinical arc reaching about 220 feet. Its mission was singular: become a mobile relay station, a temporary satellite hovering above the sea, ensuring the swarm below would never lose link, even when everything started to break apart. Next, FPV number 4 and number 5 kicked up almost at the same time, splitting to opposite sides. They dropped low and began circling in silence, skimming the surface like 2 sharks lurking just beyond sight, patiently stalking prey in radar's blind zone. And then came the final beat. FPV number 2 and number 3 surged upward with a roar. 4 brushless motors spun up to 20,000 revolutions per minute. A piercing whine tore through the calm over open water, signaling that the observation phase was over. They surged straight toward the Boyko Towers rigs, and at that exact moment, the Phantasm electronic warfare package was activated not by chance, but as a script calculated down to every beat. From high altitude, 6 UJ-26 Bober drones moved with agility, constantly shifting altitude and trajectory, sketching unpredictable loops around the platform. Down low, 5 FPVs tore through the wind from multiple directions, like spearheads converging to probe for weakness. Beneath the surface, a Magura V5 accelerated, gliding cleanly and slipping with practiced finesse between the rig's steel pillars. Every layer of space, sky, sea skim, and underwater was synchronized to perfection. This wasn't old-school radio jamming. Phantasm was intricate and rhythmic like a symphony, blending with the sound of waves into a mesmerizing but lethal melody. The UAVs weren't trying to blind Russian radar. They were trying to disorient it. By recording the Neva-B system's own scan signal and replaying it dozens of times paired with precisely calculated delays and azimuth shifts, Phantasm conjured a phantom army, targets that didn't exist, yet appeared with undeniable menace. Inside the Russian control room, a small blip on the screen suddenly swelled into a digital nightmare. 55, then 60 false tracks materialized out of nowhere, racing at high speed, coming from every direction, following impossible paths. Neva-B, built to track up to 250 targets, now had to confront a swarm of targets that obeyed no rule at all. The processor began to choke. Alarm bells hammered through the control room. The air felt tight as a drawn wire. An operator shouted into the radio, his voice cracking as composure slipped. Too many targets. No way to identify the main axis of attack. In the chaos, he clung to the one thing drilled into him at the top military academies. Lock on to the threat that looks the most dangerous. On the screen, one signal stood out faster, more erratic, brighter than all the rest. FPV number 1, the Decoy. Target locked, he called out, his voice unsteady with panic. An Igla S was launched from another soldier's shoulder. A streak of fire tore through the fog. Guided by infrared, the missile latched onto the heat signature of FPV. Number 1 running at full power. And that was exactly what Ukrainian planners had been waiting for. A blazing fireball erupted in the night sky as the Igla found its mark. FPV number 1 vanished, taking its Mirage package with it. In the same instant, 59 false signals on the Russian radar display disappeared all at once. In the control room, a heavy beat of silence passed. Then a relieved exhale, a muted cheer. They believed they had succeeded. They thought they had just pushed back the main attack, and in that exact moment, they made a fatal mistake. They had burned a precious missile, poured all their focus into a technological trick, and rushed to celebrate a victory the instant FPV number 1 went down. But high above, the relay drone kept circling with unnerving calm, holding the link steady like a metronome, pumping down a clean, seamless stream of data without a single wobble. And then FPV number 4, the first shark, received the strike signal. It stopped orbiting, pitched its nose down, sped up. In a heartbeat, it transformed from a patient predator into a guided, falling object driven by a human will on the other end of the feed. The target wasn't just anything on the rig. The target was the one thing that allowed Boyko Towers to function as a steel fortress: the Neva-B radar antenna. Through the FPV camera, the world tilted hard as the dive angle locked in. The rig's colossal steel skeleton swelled in the frame at a suffocating rate. Down on the lower decks, faint, blurred lights glowed like stray fireflies caught in sea mist. And at the highest point there it was, the dark, rotating silhouette of the radar assembly, cold and unblinking like an eye that never sleeps. The operator understood what this meant. He had one chance, one clean hit, in exactly the right place, to turn that all-seeing eye into mute scrap metal, an asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars, reduced to nothing. Back in the Russian control room, the cheering hadn't even fully faded before it was cut short. A new alarm shrieked, sharp, urgent, slicing through the air. On the screen, a single target appeared, almost out of nowhere, already inside their minimum engagement range. A high-speed target diving on bearing 090, the operator shouted, his voice tangled with disbelief and sudden fear. How is it this close? There was no time to ask, and certainly no time to understand. The 5.5-pound thermobaric warhead mounted on FPV. Number 4 wasn't about brute blast alone. It was a compact piece of physics written in 2 beats. One to disperse, one to ignite. On impact, the first charge spread fuel into a fine aerosol cloud. A split second later, the second charge triggered that cloud, blooming into a violent fireball and forcing energy exactly where it needed to break the system. The FPV slammed into the base of the antenna assembly. For a thousandth of a second, nothing happened. Then everything changed. A tight, cracking detonation followed by a flash. The protective casing was pierced instantly, the internal signal path was ripped apart, and destruction raced through the system like a live electrical surge, burning out sensitive components as it went. On the platform, the soldiers experienced it as something almost deceptively simple. A loud bang, a brief flare, a shower of sparks so fast it could be mistaken for an accident. But inside the control room, it was catastrophe. Every display tied to the Neva-B went black at once. The familiar radar sweep vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. All that remained was static, an unnatural, heavy silence, distorted and dangerous. Their world had just dropped into darkness. Russia's air defense system had completely lost its sense of direction, and this was the moment the second shark was about to strike. The entire multi-layered defensive network at the Boyko Towers had been built around that electronic eye. Now, it had collapsed. The silence inside the control room lasted only a single second before it was shattered by the commander's voice screaming through the radio, his tone trembling. Acquire visuals. The MTPU poured suppressive fire into anything that moved. On the exposed deck, the MTPU gunner didn't need a second order. His job was no longer to aim with precision. It was to deny the area. He stomped the pedal, and the twin-barreled 14.5mm cannon roared to life, spitting out 600 rounds per minute. Every second, roughly 10 high-explosive rounds detonated, turning the air into a choking haze, like a violent sandstorm made of tracer streaks and flying debris. For the operator of FPV number 5 in Odessa, his world had just become a probability equation. His screen was a chaotic mix of sea spray, muzzle flashes, and red tracer lines rushing toward him. He wasn't flying a fixed route anymore. He was fighting a close-range dogfight. High dive to evade tracer, he muttered, running purely on instinct. He shoved the controls forward and the drone plunged toward the waves. A burst of rounds ripped through the air where it had been just half a second earlier. A clean miss. He immediately changed direction, diving again sharp, unpredictable, almost alive. The Russian gunner on the mount cursed, struggling to track something that agile. It's too fast. "I can't get a bead on it," he growled, anticipating the drone's next move and firing a third. Longer bursts not at where the drone was, but at where he prayed it would be. This time, he got lucky. A single 14.5mm tracer round struck the target. It didn't vaporize the drone. Instead, it slammed into the carbon fiber arm of Rotor 3 with a sickening crack. On the operator's display, the interface flashed red. Warning: Rotor 3, RPM deviation 16%. Gyro stabilization fault warning. The drone shuddered violently, lurching hard left as the flight computer fought like mad to compensate. It had been hit. It was wounded. On the launcher, the anti-tank guided missile ATGM operator, watching through an infrared sight, saw exactly what he'd been waiting for. The drone's sharp, clean thermal signature suddenly became a flickering, unstable glow. Predator instinct. He knew what he was looking at. A wounded animal. The target had been hit. It was badly hurt. "I've got lock," he shouted to his team leader. "Fire!" came the reply. The Ukrainian operator saw the blinding white flash of the ATGM launch on his screen. A death sentence was now racing toward him at supersonic speed. He understood the reality instantly. His drone was damaged. Its maneuverability was gone. It couldn't outrun it. It couldn't break away. He had less than 3 seconds left to live. His mind spun through telemetry, data, wind speed, missile trajectory. There was only one option. Instead of trying to evade, he did something the missile's guidance logic could never anticipate. He cut power to all 4 motors. The drone went dead and became a 30-pound rock falling out of the sky. The ATGM, computer programmed to intercept an aerodynamic target along a predicted path, ran into a logical failure. Its target had simply vanished from the expected flight line. The missile punched straight through the exact point in space where the drone should have been. A perfect shot at a target that no longer existed. Miss. And its run ended with a direct impact into the drilling platform. With nothing left to lock onto, the missile's flight ended in the harshest way possible. It slammed straight into the platform itself. The explosion erupted with violent force. The tandem warhead produced a massive shock of pressure and heat, enough to damage the structure at the point of impact, trigger localized fires and secondary blasts, severely disrupt operations, and potentially cripple extraction for a long period of time. It may not have wiped out the entire Boyko Towers complex, but it certainly left a colossal price behind. Major disruption and heavy material damage. A deep, muffled, roar-heavy, primal, more threatening than any drone's whine, suddenly tore through the gunfire. It was the Magura V5. The killing blow had arrived. The unmanned craft surged forward, its water jet propulsion screaming as it climbed to 48 miles per hour. The target was now perfectly revealed because the very fires the enemy had ignited in the engine room had turned the tanker's hull into a glaring beacon for the final strike. On the bridge, the crew's frantic shouts over the radio were swallowed by a new, horrifying realization. On the surface, it wasn't a blip or a shadow racing in. It was something coming like 2 705L bombs with a steering system. It was the boat. The boat was attacking. 5 seconds to impact. 4, 3. This was no longer a firefight. It was a collision between physics and brutal overmatch. First came kinetic energy. 1.2 million foot-pounds. Like a freight train slamming into a brick wall, warping the steel skin in an instant. And then, the warhead equivalent to 500 pounds of TNT detonated. A 1,500 psi shockwave didn't just punch a hole. It surged through the ship's steel frame like an earthquake along the spine. The main fuel tanks ruptured immediately. The fuel atomized into a fine mist, and that fuel-air mixture was the true horror. Far more violent than TNT alone. It ignited at once from the flames already raging across the deck. In the first seconds after impact, there was no sound the way people expect. Only a blinding white flash powerful enough to turn night into day, swallowing everything. Then, the shockwave arrived, like a gigantic slap across the water, crashing into the Seabo's platform, shattering windows and throwing people off their feet. And then came the roar. a nightmare roar that seemed to vibrate through the soul as hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude began to burn. The ship didn't just explode, it came apart. Pressure from 1 to 500 pounds per square inches tore the structure open, and the 899 feet heaved under the monstrous blast, and the sudden shift in weight so violently it seemed to lift clear of the water for a heartbeat. Steel screamed, an ear-splitting sound like metal being snapped by bare hands. The hull broke in two. Two burning halves, now monuments to a failed mission, began to sink slowly into the depths of the Black Sea. In under 30 minutes, a plan executed by a small special operations team operating from a control point 300 miles away unleashed 5 devastating kills in rapid succession. A billion-dollar asset, along with its valuable cargo, was reduced to a charred, worthless mass of twisted metal. The most visible proof was the pillar of fire and smoke rising thousands of meters into the sky, a signal that could be seen from Crimea. The Boyko Towers, once the all-seeing eye over the northwestern Black Sea, were now nothing more than a blinded, isolated outpost. Its most advanced surveillance capability was gone, and the men assigned to defend it could only stare into the darkness, wondering what would come next. The oil tanker and the 500,000 barrels of fuel it was carrying to finance Russia's war had become a permanent artificial reef. But this was where the real damage began. Losing a single tanker from Russia's shadow fleet was already a serious problem. Now Russia understood that its primary method of breaking sanctions using aging, uninsured tankers protected by fixed military outposts was a losing strategy. The international maritime insurance market, already wary of these ghost ships, would now declare the entire northwestern Black Sea a war risk zone, sending premiums soaring. Russia's only remaining option would be to reroute its oil shipments through the already overburdened Arctic Sea route, an additional journey of several weeks and millions of dollars added to every voyage. Ukraine didn't just sink a ship. They shattered Moscow's most dangerous illusion that the Black Sea still contains safe zones that cannot be touched. In just 73 seconds, a cargo meant to fuel the war machine was turned into a sea of fire, not because Russia lacked weapons, but because it fundamentally misjudged how Ukraine now fights. What made this strike truly shocking was the simultaneous coordination of 3 layers of attack. In the air, UAVs flooded the battlespace with interference and deception, pulling radar and defenses out of position. At sea level, FPV drones skimmed low, striking directly at the Neva-B all-seeing eye. And beneath the surface, the Magura V5 accelerated silently to deliver the killing blow. 3 domains, air, surface, and subsurface, were synchronized into a single, perfectly timed action. Once the all-seeing eye was blinded, the steel fortress became useless. Russia was forced to pull its air defense systems back to protect fixed assets, dispersing its own strength in the process. This is the essence of asymmetric warfare. Not more force, just force applied at exactly the right place and moment. A strike package worth only a few $100,000 was enough to eliminate a tanker, cripple a shipping route, and deliver a cold message to Moscow. The Shadow Fleet strategy is no longer safe. So which moment stood out most to you? The electronic storm in the air, the precision strike that blinded the radar, or the final impact of the Magura V5? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.